in a situation where you find that you look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, if you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television. Now, let's start with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. The Daily Trust newspaper is leading with the story, Train Passengers Stranded. NRC loses millions as unions strike. One of the riders stayed traveling to Kaduna from Abuja by road, risky. Another states tough time for intracity commuters in Lagos. We are engaging unions, that's according to the management. And you'll see a pictorial right there that shows some of the workers carrying placards with inscriptions. You'd also see an empty Idu train station that yesterday we showed you as well on the program. And on page 7 of the Daily Trust newspaper, you'd see I am waiting and SARS reports from states. Buhari tells US. You'd also see on page 45 again, Kwankwaso Wali field forces PDP to postpone Northwest Congress. You'd also see Nigeria US sign $2.17 billion deal on education, health orders.
Okay. Well, quite interesting stories, you may say. The one about the president waiting for the NSAS report. Well, we are all waiting for the final outcome, of all the panels that were set. From what we know so far, about 28 panels were set across the country. The Lagos has submitted its own report, which is causing a whole lot of reactions. And other states have also submitted their reports. Others are still in the process of putting it together and all of that. So we continue to follow that for you on the program. All right. Now let's take a look at other papers this morning. And this time around, we look at The Guardian. And on The Guardian newspaper, we have the lead story says, #NSAS report, why we are yet to act, Buhari tells Blinken. Recall that yesterday, United States Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, visited Nigeria, which is one of the 3 African countries that he will be visiting, although from what we know, he has visited Kenya as well. Below the lead story, you would see the writer, Blinken, we insist on accountability, addressing victims' grievances. Nigeria must be redesignated on religious violators list. U.S. agency kicks. FG Oyebode Oseni Horiwa react to removal from religious freedom blacklist. And you also see Buhari signs climate change, AMCON amendment bills into law. Insecurity, lower oil production, slow economic growth in the third quarter. And then at the very bottom of the Guardian newspaper, 155 days after, detained IPOP spy girl, Gloria Okori, arraigned in court. So these are the stories that made the headlines on The Guardian this morning.
Okay, let's take a look at the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. On page 26, you'd find Kanu alleges inhumane treatment in detention. The Daily Sun is leading with the story, fears in Bielsa over gas leak. Bandits now use radio frequency walkie-talkie. Victim narrates 29-day ordeal with kidnappers in Niger State. You'd also see on page 27, #NSAS report. I'm waiting for Sanwo-Olu, other governors, according to Buhari. And on page 26, you'd find land restoration. Noge, Enugu community thank Ugwai for promoting justice. These are some of the lead stories on The Sun this morning.
All right. Well, that's about what we have. Not to lose sight of the story that says strike. ASU, FG reached truce as Gbajabiamila intervenes. That's on the Daily Trust. So we missed that earlier on. It's a very interesting story if you look at the conversations that has been ongoing. Well, let's get perspectives on this. We told you that we have in the studio a TV host and a journalist, Desmond Utomwen, who will be giving us perspectives on the stories that made the headlines. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, now let's begin with the whole ASU federal government thing. Again, we are seeing the back and forth. ASU is threatening to go back, on strike again. And then the federal government is saying, well, we have issues with implementing because there's some kind of disagreement, between ASU and the other unions on the sharing formula for the monies that has been approved and all of that. Now, there seems to be a truce. Are we sure that this truce will not, again, be dissolved at the end of the day, just like
the truce becomes troubled?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's something to cheer about at the end of the day, because probably by yesterday it would have been a different story. It would have been a different kind of analysis here. We would have been talking about the palpable fear in the air as to whether or not the strike was going on or was going to hold, and how long the children in school were going to stay out of school. Again, considering what happened the previous year, where they were out for about 9 months, and COVID also came in and all of that. So this time around, it's good for us to read this morning that a truce has been brokered, and to also recall that the Speaker of the House of Reps, person of Femi Gbajabiamila, was really instrumental to this truce that was brokered. I saw some of the news yesterday, and I think there was also some meeting with the Minister of Finance, the Minister of State for Education. We are all in the meeting, and perspectives were given as to why some of this money has not got into ASU, and how much also has also been released. I think the Minister of Finance spoke about 18 billion that has been released, and some other money that will also get to ASU very, very soon. So it's money issue we are talking about here. I think it's about 1.3 trillion. That is the total amount of money that ASU placed on the doorstep of the federal government for infrastructural revampment of the tertiary institution. But you know very well, the country does not have money, whether we like it or not. And the indices are there. If the country has money, they won't be going everywhere looking for money to borrow.
Is it a problem of not having money, or is it a problem of priority here?
I think money is an issue. When you don't have money, or when you don't have sufficient money, you start prioritizing. Economics, we talk about opportunity cost, all right? Start talking about scale of preference. Mm-hmm. Which one are you going to take first? If you don't mind, you use the word prioritization, all right? Which one are you going to take first as against the other? But if you have sufficient money or excess money, what do? You just spend the money. You spread the money. You remember there was a time in this country where they talk about our problem was not money, but how to spend it. Mm-hmm. But this time around, I think the reverse is the case.
So
right? Because there are so much challenges out there.
Is it that Nigeria is a poor country, going by this analysis that you're giving?
I don't want to say Nigeria is a poor country, but I think we don't have the kind of money we used to have. And there are reasons for this. One, we are not producing full capacity with oil, right? Even the OPEC quotas that we have had, we've never produced to optimal. Secondly, the price of oil has also been fluctuating. There was a time it was up to $120 per barrel. But today, when it goes just a little above $70, we are happy. And when we are happy for that, the burden comes with it, because we don't refine the product. Whatever was supposed to be the gains that we make is also eroded by the subsidy that the government has to pay for the landing cost of refined petroleum product.
But some would say, why oil? Does it have to be oil? What happens to the other?
Of course, I was going to talk about all of those reasons, but that is the mainstay of the Nigerian economy at the moment, talking about oil. Without oil, nothing we do today, all right? More than 80% of our internal revenue comes from oil. So until we are able to diversify the economy, even though this word has now become a cliche that I've talked about diversification of the economy, some will even tell you that the economy is already diversified, all right, but we are just not raking in the needed resources from it. But whatever semantics, whatever English, whatever jargons people want to use about this, I think there is need for the country to have revenues coming from different aspects of the economy, not just from the oil. Agriculture is supposed to be one of them, but with insecurity in the country lately, you know what has happened with most people unable to cultivate the land, and even when they do, sometimes the bandit and the security threat also take away the gains that would have been coming from there. The CBN has tried to intervene in so many ways with the Anchor Borrowers program and all that, but the gains are not coming like expected because of some other forces or other factors, if you don't mind. Solid mineral is another area we should be talking about. But how well have we been able to also harness these solid minerals? If you know and if you recall very well, the crisis that happened in how banditry started in Zamfara State, for example, and the Northwest, it was all tied to the solid mineral, particularly the gold. All right, and today you know how terrible that zone is in terms of insecurity, that the Nigerian security operatives are doing so much to make sure that they curb the insecurity in that area. Of course, there are other things. Have we also paid enough attention to tourism in this country? All right, with insecurity in the land, nobody wants to come visit your country for the sake of tourism. That means the capital that would have been coming in that area is stalled because of insecurity. There's so much that needs to be spoken about here. Entertainment is another area that is giving so much to Nigeria. That area is just like on autopilot. The young people are doing wonders there. I don't know how much of social media you follow. A young Nigerian by name Davido came up 2 days ago, just said he wanted to celebrate his birthday, celebrate me, and the whole social media was gone. And within 24 hours, he has raked in about 150 million. That people are now beginning to copy the model, you know, and all that. But that is just
all right. Now talking about revenue,
part of it.
I really, I've been meaning, to ask this still regarding, the ASU strike and all of that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the students.
Yes.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic came, we always have incessant strikes, that happen in the country. And then the COVID-19 pandemic came. This affected, the curriculums in schools, and most of these universities, when we came back from the COVID-19, we're trying to, meet up to that curriculum. How does this, negatively affect the students?
So much. You have a course that's supposed to ordinarily take you 4 years, and sometimes you have to spend 6 to 7 years in school. That already has affected you. All right. I've listened to some interviews during when these children were on strike, and some of the TV stations went out there to take their reactions and all that. You could feel the pains in their eyes. Some people wanted to plan their life. Within the next 4 years, I'm out of school, I have this to do, I have that to do. But unfortunately, they are unable to do it. All right. So the calendar is already altered. It's enough trauma for the children. But even beyond that is the fact that the parents who are supposed to also just probably take up that burden of themselves in 4 years are also forced to stress beyond that time of they're expected. But like I said earlier on, it's a traumatic experience for anybody who has to stay in school for like 6 to 7 years, whereas 4 years was supposed to be the stipulated time.
All right, now talking about revenue generation. Here again, we are about to lose millions of naira as workers of railway, decided that look, they are down in tools from yesterday. What's your thoughts around this?
Again, money comes into play here, because they are talking about their remunerations, they are not well paid, they need to be well taken care of, and all of that. But again, if you look at the railway system today, I think is one area that we really need to invest so much in, because we've seen the benefits. The benefits in terms of how, with insecurity, for example, in a country, traveling on certain routes, people have now begun to rely on the rail transportation. Is one area that you don't want to joke with. Then secondly, with railway, you're able to carry some very heavy duty product. All right, unlike what happens with the vehicles. The road dilapidates so quickly because of the pressure that comes from some of these heavy items that are carried on the road. But with the rail, you're able to like move these very heavy commodities. All right. So it's another reason that we need to invest in the rail. Then again, it's also very fast. Some people have spoken about how easy and comfortable it is for them to travel from Abuja to Kaduna, and from Abuja to Itakbe, through Lokoja and others to Delta State and all of that. For those that also are looking at the Lagos-Ibadan axis of it, they're also enjoying it. So the comfort is also there. If you go to most developed countries, for example, one of the major transport system is rail. Whether the subway or the regular train is just there. It's not something that we should joke with. I think the fact that we have not given it the attention, or we didn't give it the attention it required over the years, was misplaced on the part of our leaders. All right, but it's good that we have woken up to the responsibility and to the reality that we need to invest in that area. But as it is, the government needs to listen to these people. All right, give them some of their dues, give them maybe better condition of service, and I think they will go back to work.
Okay. You know, another story of interest is about, you know, the NSAS report, where we're seeing the president saying, I am awaiting NSAS report from states. Buhari tells the U.S. What is your thought about this?
It was a very smart response, I must say. As funny, as questionable as some people have tried to look at it, but I think it was a very smart response. Because the NSAS protests, the panel report that came out from the judicial panel in Lagos has been damning, you might say. That I was wondering how the government was going to respond to it. But when I saw that response, I thought it was very, very smart, because really, it gives the government enough time to appraise everything totally. Even though they could have just come out to say, okay, fine, yes, some things went wrong, all right, and there is need for us to look at it and probably. But again, you also know that Nigeria is a federation. And as a federation, the state are supposed to be independent in carrying out certain responsibility. The states were the ones that set up these judicial panels of inquiry, all right? They are the ones to take the report, come up with a white paper, all right, and now determine whether to even prosecute some of these people. It is where there is now a need for the federal government to come in, because if you, for example, want to prosecute a police officer or a soldier, it must be with recourse to the federal government. At that point, you probably need the federal government. But I think at this time, really, it is still a state matter.
Exactly, which is for some legal pundits the crux of the matter. How do you take an issue, a state judicial panel, for instance, making recommendations for disciplinary action against people who are working for the federal government? So it becomes very difficult in terms of implementation. What are your expectations in those kind of scenarios?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, there must be a common ground. There must be a meeting point between the state and the federal government. They don't work in isolation. They don't work in vacuum. All right, the federal government and the states have a meeting point always. You cannot say because a crime was committed in government house in a state that the federal government does not have a say in it. The FCC will move there, and the FCC is an agency of the federal government. That means there is a meeting point. All right. So at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, when the report, when the white paper is out, and a recommendation probably is sent to the federal government, and action will be taken.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, there's been quite a mention of this white paper. To a layman, he doesn't actually know what a white paper means. What really is a white paper?
It's more or less like an endorsement of the report that came out, the recommendation that came out from that panel that was set up. The government has the right to say, no, we are not accepting this your recommendation. And if that happens, and they didn't, you know, when a recommendation is given by a committee that you set up, they submit a report to you. That endorsement that you have accepted this report and you are going to implement it, all right, give it a stamp of approval. So the white paper is more or less a stamp of approval on whatever the panel has done. As it is now, that report can still die a natural death.
Okay.
The Nigerian way.
Okay.
Yes. It is very possible.
Which is one of the concern of
it is very possible.
the NSAS protesters that look, I mean, this whole thing, we've seen it before.
Yes.
You know, a committee will be set up, and then after that,
Yes.
there'll be a white paper, and then in the process of that coming up with that white paper, that's where the real thing happens. Some feel that, okay, it's probably going to be altered. You know, some of the recommendations that were made.
In any case,
you
even
know,
after
and then
the
at
white,
the end of the day, it may not see the light of day. So
I
it
agree with
defeats
you.
the
I
purpose.
agree with you. Even after the white paper has been released, if the government doesn't want to implement, they still will not implement.
But
And action will still not be taken.
But
But
doesn't
what's
this,
the
you
danger
know,
of this?
Exactly.
Really?
Very well.
What's the
I
danger?
think we should first of all look at what are the gains. The gains are that the young people have now been vindicated. That really there was shooting on that very day. That is one of the things that the report has done. The young people are now vindicated that some of them were actually killed during that October 20 incident at the Lekki toll gate. They've been vindicated. Even though the military tried to defend themselves, put up some very flimsy excuses and some stories that didn't meet standards at that time, because if you remember, you could remember the track of lies that they told to cover up all of these things.
It
The
was
first
fake
that they did
news,
was
and
that
that
it was
not
fake
true,
news.
it was
They even
social
took some
media.
of the newspapers. I don't know if Daily Trust was part of the newspapers then, that they tagged fake news on the cover and posted it on their Twitter handles and all
In
of
fact,
those
the
things.
Minister of Information described it as a
Repeatedly
phantom
debunked.
massacre.
Yes.
It's a phantom massacre. It
Yeah.
only happened on social media.
I don't have much problem with the Minister of Information as much as I do with the Nigerian Army. The reason is simple. The Minister of Information was not there. But the Nigerian Army is an agency of government. And they went out there, all right, visited mayhem on Nigerian youth that were protesting with Nigerian flags on their hands, sitting on the floor, reciting the national anthem, armless. And they were killed. Some of them were killed. And they came out to tell us that nothing happened. They described the video as doctored. That's a live stream video that was on Instagram as doctored. They came out to say nothing happened. As a matter of fact, they deny it. So if that was a report that was given to the Minister of Information, you can't blame him too much. That is to some extent, all right? But why did the military has to lie? That is the question. Because their responsibility is to protect lives and property, is to defend the territorial integrity of the country. Of course, they don't just come to the streets to do that as often until they are called in. For whatever reason they were called in, fine, if they needed to come out. But now that they have come out, their job was not to kill those people.
Now,
And if there was one person that was killed, the state must rise up and defend that one person. I have been a victim of police brutality, for example.
Okay, so now the reports also said that, look, the invitation of the military to that scene was unwarranted, given the fact that there was the crowd there was not posing any kind of threat, and that there were other threats in other parts of Lagos, but the troops were not deployed to those locations, and except Lekki Tollgate and all of that.
Yeah,
So-
we can debate all of that, whether they needed to come or they didn't need to come. But my position is this: even if they needed to come, they didn't have any reason, any right to take the life of anybody.
Does the Nigerian police has the capacity right now to suppress insurrection as we have it now? And if they don't, what lessons have we learned?
Well, I think there is my fear about the last NSAS protests is that the government may never allow that happen any longer. That is my fear. That's my concern. I said it last year when this happened that if I were part of the protest directly, if I were, of course we know it was a leaderless protest. If, for example, there was an identified leader and we could pass words across to those people, I would have asked those people to go back home after the president addressed the country and said that they were accepting the 545 demand. The protest would have ended at that point. But of course, at some level, it became political. We must admit this. As much as we want to talk about what the government didn't do right, what the security did wrong, the protest lingered for too long for me. I thought that at that point that the demand we accepted, we should have gone back home, probably give what you call a timeline within which we expect the government to implement those demands. If they don't implement the demand, we'll come back to the streets. But the fact that the protest was sustained, and some people were now trying to take advantage of the protest, going political and all of those things, asking the president should resign, should go, and all of those kind of chants, for me, were unwarranted.
Now,
If we're talking about NSAS protest, I know that was a metaphor for so many things, all right? But we didn't need to lose focus in that protest.
Before the military were invited, to that scene, we saw that there were police officers there.
Yes.
Right? And in some cases, hoodlums and thugs
Yes.
will come, attack protesters, and the police will be aloof, watching, and you wonder what exactly is going on. Is it that the police officers do not have the capacity to protect the protesters as provided by the law, or is it just an act of dereliction?
If you look at it, after that October 20th incident, even the police, some of them were not putting on their uniform because they were also on the track. I don't know if you recall that when the hoodlums came in, but we must recall also perfectly that the hoodlums, in quotes, didn't come before the October 20th. It was after that Lekki incident that everything went out of hand. All right. Before then, the young guys that were protesting at the Lekki toll gate were very organized. Even when some of them had issues, they contributed money among themselves, took care of them. They were very organized, even without leaders, very organized, all right? Contributed money to a particular woman they said was selling, I think, granules along there. They helped her with, they were so organized. They were trying to redefine what leadership should be. If leaders since 1960 have not been able to give them the kind of future, the kind of leadership that they wanted, let's at least give them, show them what we want from the leader. And they were doing that, all right, until that particular incident of that October 20th. That was where everything took a turn. The burning, the arson in so many parts of Lagos where businesses were destroyed and all that didn't happen until after the 20th of October. Even the Abuja incident didn't happen until after the 20th incident. So at that point, the police didn't have much control over what was happening with the protests. Of course, some of them were running for their dear lives. Even the reports of the judicial panel that was released from Lagos also contained some number of police officers or security operatives that were killed. So they were on that trail themselves. So for that very reason, you cannot really tell. That is why you don't need crisis of that magnitude. All right? Once it starts, it goes out of hand, and it takes so much to bring it under control.
Some of the protesters, most of them just wanted the president to address them at that point.
But he did.
But he did not.
He did. He did. The president, there was an address. The president said
they wanted that to come. When they started the protest, they just wanted to hear from him, but he didn't say anything.
This is what I'm saying. All right, I followed that protest very well because I was an interested party. I was an interested party, not because I was on the streets of Lagos, but because I had suffered police brutality. So I really wanted to see how this will end. I still hold the record of the only journalist that has taken Nigerian police to court and won against them. All right? That is on record. So I wanted to see what has happened or what was going to happen. So you recall that even the police IG received Davido and his people, and they accepted the 545. The president also addressed, he said, "We have heard you loud and clear." If you recall that line, there was a briefing by Mr. President. I heard that also. So at that point, for me,
was that a press statement, or
it wasn't a press statement.
Actually,
it was a broadcast. Yeah. So I heard that then, and if that was what it was, as at that time, that softened my heart to some extent. That okay, fine, the benefit of doubt. Even though we've not really been given reasons to trust the words of government over the years, all right. Like I always want to make reference to since 1960. Even though we have not really been given reasons, because government tells you one thing and they do another, all right? But having spoken, what do? You have to at least allow them
finally,
to act.
Just for us to round up, we have to learn lessons from
yes.
this. At what point do you say, okay, the crowd is becoming violent, we need to deploy military into this matter? At what point do you do that? Or is it just by mere citing a group of young people gathered together for a protest?
Unfortunately, we have to, it will be at the discretion of the security operatives, but I want to say here that the crowd we had at Lekki Toll Gate was not violent. And if that was not violent, so it didn't warrant the invitation of the military. I know they just wanted to get the boys off the streets. That was why those who invited them, but there was absolutely no need for it. I think some words of persuasion still would have helped. Persuade those young people to go off the streets, all right? Keep re-echoing what the president has said, that they have heard, and they were going to act. I think that would have done. But whoever also passed information across to Mr. President, because there was this narrative too that it was going to, they were going to overthrow the government and all of those things. Those narrative also came into the picture. Then who probably passed those information, and if they had enough security report as to that very reason.
Do you think that's part of the political hijack that we are talking about?
I wouldn't. Unfortunately, we wouldn't know all that happened behind the closed door. But whoever sowed those kind of a narrative probably may not have also done enough. But of course, sometimes, somehow, I think they also have enough reasons, because some people were already talking about president must resign and all that. As when this happens, I'm talking about the, what do you call it, the Arab Spring. All right, the narrative of the Arab Spring was also brought into it. Some people were saying that this government must come down and all of those things. So if that was the case, you also might not want to blame the government who wants to fight to maintain law and order. But I must say, the Nigeria army didn't have any reason to have shot a live bullet at that venue. If it was a blank bullet, of course we would have understood. If nobody was killed, we would have understood. But even if they didn't shoot a live bullet there, the fact that you're already shooting, there could be stampede, considering the number of persons that were there. That is why they didn't need to go the way they did. And of course, they chose night to also go there. It raises more questions than answer. Just yesterday, I must tell you, the way the Nigerian army sometimes behave against the people, all right, we suffered in their hands. My staff went to Old Parade Ground to go cover the NCDC, I think, third launch of the vaccine thing. And just close, you know that it's close to the Nigerian Army headquarters, all right? There was one of the Army officers, one named Korede Mary is her name, and she was driving behind my driver. And I think I was trying to pull back because there was traffic in front, and there was a little dent on her car. Guess what she did? She personally impounded our official vehicle and locked it inside their complex. Took the key from the driver. I say, you don't take laws into your hands. You don't have that power. Confiscated the cameras. You don't do that. If your car has been bashed for any reason, what do? You either settle, demand for a repair, or if push comes to shove, you call in the police. You are not even the police. But that was what he did. That is excessive. That is people becoming power drunk. That is what you see with our security operatives in this country. The police does it. The army does it, or they do it rather. All right. So if this is what happens broad daylight, all right, at such an event, what do you think could happen in some lonely areas where people cannot protect themselves? I recall earlier, I told you earlier on that, for example, I'm a victim of police brutality. It was in Area 3 here, in Abuja, that it did it, brought the light. There was a protest going on. A journalist with camera and a midget covering an event became the victim at the end of the day because they wanted to cover what they have done. They didn't want those things reported. That's the fate Nigerians suffer in the hands of these people. So when the young people went out there to go protest against SARS, the killings by SARS, they were not doing it because they were too happy doing it. They were not happy going on the street. They were doing it because they have had too many people suffer, and you don't know who next is going to be a victim. Right. But I must say this, the government must listen to the people. I know the president has said that he's waiting for all the reports from the state. That is very good. I will agree with him in that area. But when eventually all the reports come out, he should please take the action that will solve this problem once and for all. Because Nigerians need to have security operatives they can call their own, that they will be confident of when they see them on the street, not those that will come against them and kill them at will.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with us. We have to wrap it up here for today. We hope to have you again on the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
But in a situation where you find that look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
Because I have said that